Are you concerned that that money is contingent on some sort of grand bargain that's been out of reach for decades?
I am worried about that because it is really complicated. Our border can always be have room for improvement for sure. Our immigration needs to be worked on, and I'm happy to talk about what I think we ought to do there. But I believe what I said the other day. The Ukrainian people have done so much more than anyone would have expected of them when Putin started this lawless war by invading them. They've taken back half the territory he took back. They have basically disabled his navy in the Black Sea and opened up food for the rest of the world. They've won battle after battle after battle, and they've gotten to a point where there's a sort of a stasis on the front line that some people is looking at a failure. I say, look at the receipts that these guys have put up. It's unbelievable what they've achieved. And the last thing we should do is cut and run because of some disagreement that we have here. We can't do that. If we do that, we will surrender Ukraine to Putin. Zelensky has told us that. If we do that, we will have surrendered our leadership in the free world and in NATO. And if we do that, we have sent Xi Jinping a green light for what he wants to do with Taiwan. So the stakes could not be higher. Could not be higher.
So with the stakes, Senator, with the stakes that high and needing agreement potentially on a border security measure to make sure the U.S. does not do all of those things, I know you said you would tell us what you think should be done with the border, but I think probably the better question is what can be done that will pass your chamber and the House of Representatives? Where is the room for bipartisan compromise here?
I think that's a much better question than what I would do. I mean, what I would do is something a lot like the Gang of Eight bill that we wrote in 2013. But what's possible under these circumstances? Look, it is not a secret that there have been gangs that exist south of our border that have been making billions of dollars smuggling people throughout the world to the southern border of the United States. That's a fact. It's not an issue in dispute that has overwhelmed our border, that we can't process the people properly as a result of the numbers of people that are coming over. So it would seem to me that having some agreements about how people at the border are met and what funds are available to be able to process people in a way that would make sense to the American people. I hope that is a place where Democrats and Republicans can agree. I hope that brings even more Republicans to support this Ukrainian legislation, and I hope it will lead to the passage of this bill in the House. We also have to pass it there as well. It's important to remember.
Well, it sounds like there could be different strings attached to money for Israel as well as Ukraine, because there are calls from a number of Democrats to have accountability here that attaches money to adherence with international humanitarian law. The Republican leader in the Senate was talking about the money for Israel, Mitch McConnell. Here's what he said to reporters earlier today. Senator, we'll have you respond.
On Thanksgiving Day, got a call from the Prime Minister of Israel. I think it's really important that we not pressure the Israelis into a situation where they can't ultimately achieve their goal.
Are we actually just achieving a slowdown for money on both fronts, Israel and Ukraine, Senator?
We're going to have to figure out how to get this all done. It's so important. I mean, I've told you why I think Ukraine is important. I spent the morning with my colleagues in a bipartisan session watching the video of most of it actually taken by Hamas of the savagery that they committed in Israel. And I'm telling you, I mean, any parent, I have 3 kids of my own, any son or daughter who saw that would want to exact revenge, would want to protect themselves. These terrorists have taken the worst tactics of ISIS and they've used it on the battlefield. At the same time, it's critically important, I think, for Israel's sake and for those of us that have high aspirations for democracy, that everything is done to try to protect as much civilian life as possible. And the Israelis have a very difficult responsibility to fulfill, especially under circumstances where Hamas is literally using other human beings, literally using the Palestinian people as a human shield. And what that means is that they're putting people in front of Israel's armaments and in front of public infrastructure where they're hiding. So this is very, very difficult. And I am sure we're going to have a debate in the coming days about what sorts of conditions ought to be placed here, if any conditions should be placed here, or whether the conditions that we have for all of our military aid that have to do with compliance with international law and human rights are sufficient. I know there are some people that also have wanted to put conditions on the funding to Ukraine. So, but the point is the point you made, which is we don't have a moment to lose here. And we've got to, this is one of those cases, a rare case, where this is not a week in the history of this place where we can just have our partisan disagreement fail, blame each other for it, and go home and say, well, we'll come back next week or next month or next year. This is not one of those cases. We have to get it done in the next week or 10 days, and I think we'll succeed.
Well, Senator, I wonder if something else can be done in the next week or 10 days, and that's a workaround to Senator Tommy Tuberville's blockade of military promotions. He has maintained a remarkable degree of consistency. He is not moving on this. So what's up to other Senate Republicans now?
Well, I'm on the Rules Committee. We've passed out a bill there that would, if it went to the floor and we voted on it, would change the Senate rules to take away from Tommy Tuberville the veto that he's placed on every single military promotion in America, the veto that he's placed on every single military family in America who's trying to decide whether to put their kids in school or whether their spouse can actually get a job teaching or being a nurse or doing something else, because he won't allow them to go forward and gain the positions that they've worked their entire lives to do. I know my Republican colleagues have grown very weary of this, and Senator McConnell has said that now was not exactly the time to do it, but it could be in the next few weeks. And I imagine if this comes to a vote on the floor, we will vote to overcome Tommy Tuberville. Senator Tuberville should change his mind. You said he's been consistent. He's been consistently wrong on this from the very beginning, and he should stop.